So I've been studying marketing a bit lately for my own nefarious purposes because I'm bad at it in the first place and want to get better, and my silly little brain had a sudden random thought. Why are some games popular? Sometimes I feel like there's no rhyme or reason to a game's sudden popularity in the content creator sphere. And sometimes things make a whole lot of sense. So I decided to make a video and do my own research. And then I got food poisoning real bad and had to stop for a bit. But now my stomach is only mildly rejecting everything, so I'm back on track. You'll hear so many people talking about good games or bad games. This of course differentiates from person to person, and then the importance of each factor will differentiate from person to person as well. The reason why I want to talk about this is because it helps us consumers consume more mindfully and gives game developers an idea of what their audience wants. Today I'm going to walk you through the different but interlinked aspects of video games and ask you what makes a game popular, what leads us to buy it. Marketing is a very, very important aspect of video games. Marketing is everywhere, and it's not something we always think about. It's the first taste we get of a game through the trailers, descriptions, screenshots, gameplay footage, and even the e-commerce site listings. It's our first impression of a game and what makes us want to buy it in the first place. It sets our expectations of the game in the first place, and if the marketing doesn't match the final product, then all you do is annoy the people who bought into the hype. Even better if you like the look of the collector's editions or limited edition. If it's a new game and not a remake, updated re-release, or a port, you're spending a lot of your hard-earned money on the promise that you'll love the game, on the stuff you get with the game. I bought the collector's editions for BlazBlue Continuum Shift, Persona 2 Innocent Sin PSP, Tales of Exilia 2, Fate Extra, Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia, Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition, Tales of Symphonia Remastered, and Persona 5 Royal, not necessarily in chronological order. I also got the Day 1 edition of Tales of Exilia 1 because it was the only one remaining in the blockbusters that was going out of business soon. I bought the collector's editions of the Tales games because I either enjoyed the previous game or I enjoyed the previous version of the game. I recall Tales of Exilia 2's in particular because I got my first anime figurine of the main character Luca, and my grandma asked me if it was my boyfriend. I nearly died inside. If I remember correctly, I got the Fire Emblem Echoes and Fate Extra Collector's Editions because I really enjoyed the artwork. I knew of Hidari from the Atelier series and just really liked the look of Fate Extra, and it wasn't too expensive for me at the time, so I thought, why not? I don't think I finished Fate Extra to this day. I did enjoy Fire Emblem Echoes though. I thought the Collector's Edition stuff was cute. The little pixel pin badges in particular. The developer is also part of the marketing as they're part of the overall brand of the game, and then the game becomes part of their brand as well. The name can create an expectation of what the game will be like, be it for good or for ill. If you think Nintendo, you think of all ages games generally that are fun, brightly coloured, maybe a bit challenging. If you think of Toby Fox, you think retro aesthetics, killer soundtrack, funny dialogue. For anime-style games, the artist who does the character designs can be a selling point these days. Often these artists have a following either through Fate Grand Order or being a famous VTuber parent, so having their name associated with a game can be a big boon. If you're, part of that crowd. Speaking of associations, you can build an association by making a game that's like another game. Can't make it too similar, otherwise you'll be accused of copying, but by making a game that's like another game but better in some way, that's also a marketing tactic. Like, that's how Fortnite claimed its throne. It was PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, but you can build stuff. And now Fortnite is way more known than PUBG with all of its celebrity brand deals and bright and colourful aesthetic. I just remember PUBG as being quite more, it looked more like the Call of Duties, the traditional war games with the bleak aesthetics. It was a thing for a while. I watched Sean the YouTube Skull play it a lot. And I think PUBG also attempt to sue Epic Games for stealing the entire video game format. Hello, this is Editing Pink. Turns out that PUBG Corp did try to sue Fortnite, and they dropped the lawsuit suddenly, because, well, people think it was because it was a fairly frivolous lawsuit, because you can't copyright game formats. Okay, back to regular Pink. I digress. Anyway, I have opinions on the Fortnites, but I'm instead going to refer you to a Dan Olsen video and call it good. I'm allergic to Fortnite. I'm so allergic to Fortnite. If you catch me playing Fortnite, it's not me, it's a body snatcher. Another thing is influencers. Hello, I'm not really an influencer, am I? Do I count? In the current day and age, content creators such as myself playing games can make or break sales numbers. Games become memes, the players playing them become memes, etc, etc. The bigger the influencer playing your game, the more eyeballs on your game, the more potential sales. People even started making games that are mechanically awful, but an interesting challenger for people such as influencers to play for content.
Well, this doesn't seem too hard. It's just walking. I'm pretty good at that. I can't be going down. Ah!
And then people want to play that game for content or to beat a high score in. Fun fact, getting over it has a bad ending. Word of mouth is also important. Semi-related to influencers and content creators. If you play a good game, you recommend it to your friends, or you write a review of it on Steam. I think that's how I found out about Stardew Valley in the first place. My big sister called it Gay Harvest Moon and I just said, sold! As a matter of fact, I think I played more Stardew than actual Harvest Moon or Story of Seasons. I did borrow my sister's copy of one of the Game Boy Advance Harvest Moons, and I wasn't super into it because I was playing as a stinky boy! I think later I did find out that version of that game had a version where you could play as a female character, but I think my sister was just a bit more interested in playing as a dude and romancing women. I wasn't surprised when she married a woman. One example of bad marketing was definitely Catley. I did talk about it in a video already. The initial Game Awards trailer had no gameplay, and it looked like iffy generative AI made designs. The website from before it was revamped had fashion items that were definitely Gen I in my opinion as a person with eyes. They did certainly provide actual gameplay footage after the backlash, but it was too little too late and public trust no longer really exists. Regardless of what the actual game is going to be like, most people with the sense to hate the art and word stealing programs are going to be side-eyeing any project Super Authentic are going to be associated with. Another game to think about is No Man's Sky. I remember before it came out, its selling point was the procedurally generated planets, and then when it came out for real, I remember the words busy work the game being thrown around, and my university professor dissing it mid-lecture. I haven't actually played it myself, but from the looks of it, it was released too soon and needed a bit more time to finish. To my understanding, it's actually a decent game now in 2025, but there are a lot of features that weren't available on launch due to Sony rushing the game. There's a portion of people who decided to give the developers the benefit of the doubt, but for others, it's a case of once bitten, twice shy. Gameplay is arguably the most important part of a game. It's how you actually engage with the game. I feel like I don't need to explain too much about this part. There are many types of game that all play in different ways, i.e. the genre of the game, and then each game is so unique that it's hard to do one-size-fits-all genres. I did a video on games genres a while ago, and I think my point about roguelikes still stands. We've gotten to a point in gaming 50 or so years in where a lot of formulas have been well established down to the control schemes. There are generally agreed upon ways to do a lot of genres, like FPS games are shooters that you play from the perspective of the character you're playing at. Soulsborns are hack and slash games that are fucking hard. But then each game developer team will tackle the gameplay for their particular game in a way that is hopefully unique to them in some way. There are two ways to make a good game popular. Either do the established formula really, really well, or do something unique and different with the formula. Or both. Both is an option. I said 2 and then I listed 3. I'm a dingus. As an example of doing a formula really, really well, Hades is a progressively difficult hack-and-slash dungeon crawler. If you call it a roguelike, I will vomit. It brings you in with Zagreus' bisexual abs and fun characterization, and it challenges you with fun and difficult fights. You will die, but you'll gain more power with every run. Dungeons are somewhat random per run, so you'll see familiar elements, but not necessarily in the order you saw it in the previous run. Power-ups are also somewhat random, so you can tailor your power sets to your specific run and what you're used to and comfortable with. For the other example, Undertale fucks with the established formula really well. It's like a traditional turn-based JRPG, but per every enemy turn, you can dodge attacks instead of just taking the hit. If you're good at it, you don't have to take damage at all. My issue is I have repetitive strain injury in my right hand, so unfortunately I have a bit of difficulty with the harder sections in the game. I mitigated this issue by using my homemade fight stick that my dad and I made. I maintained my stance that actual non-joke difficulty modes would help with this issue, but I kind of doubt that would ever happen. In spite of my desire for accessibility features, I do still think Undertale's gameplay is really innovative in battles. It establishes its own formula for fights, then fucks with you relentlessly in boss fights, especially in the famous Sans Underman fight and the neutral and true pacifist run's final bosses. In fact, Flowey's boss fight completely forgoes the turn-based aspect and just turns into Ho-Ho Project. Straight up bullet hell. Minus the all-female cast. It also ties the gameplay and the story really well. Gameplay is so heavily implied to be diegetic that it might as well be textual. Like when you're fighting Sans, you can really feel the oppressive rage and sadness of the character in the fight, who did kill his brother after all for the sake of making numbers go up. Why wouldn't he throw everything he has at you? And if you've seen me play Sonic Forces in the Sonic X Shadow Yaoi generations, you can tell I love being mildly fucked with in gameplay. Not every game has a story, but story is still important nonetheless. Sometimes the game itself tells a story. Sometimes the story is real life happenings related to the game. One of my go-to pieces of video game trivia is, did you know that Final Fantasy 1-3's developer, Nasir Gabelli, was a runaway Iranian prince? I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that. That's part of the story that surrounds the early Final Fantasy series that not a lot of people know about. Sometimes the story is one the player makes for themselves. Games like Minecraft are a big one here. In the base Minecraft gameplay, there isn't really a traditional story. There are certainly goals, but you're free to get there however you please and take however long you want. And that can create some fun anecdotes along the way. My example is the time when I was much younger, had a complete brain fart, and decided I wanted lava-based lighting in my wooden house, and burned my home to the ground. Heck, a lot of content creators' careers were based on the fun storytelling and creativity in Minecraft. And we won't mention any names because they might be a fucking pervert. Is there a Minecraft creator who isn't a fucking sex pest? Or bigoted in some way? I hate that I have to ask that. The most common practice is to make the game into a story that you follow along with and have an effect on. You're working towards the end of the story. Sometimes you can take the story into different directions and there are multiple endings. The story, how it plays out, the character interactions, all of the above can make or break a game. The thing about criticizing a game for its story is that it's hard to critique a game's story outright without offending someone. I tend to think that games whose stories are just excuses to objectify women are bad. There are shockingly enough people who agree with me. Weird that. Then when I talked about a certain game that I won't name, I got fucking dogpiled. It's not like my opinion has changed, but no, I won't mention the name. You're free to look it up, but I'm not gonna say it. From all my mild criticisms of Undertale's and Deltarune's gameplay, the stories that Toby Fox writes are fantastic. He's a master of setting the mood. It's clear to me that he has passion and care for his craft. His settings and concepts are either unique or super weird. And if I was more Italian and had more mobile hands in 2D, I'd chef kiss his character interactions. The thing that you need to make a game story good is either uniqueness, well-executed concepts, or both. Not every story will appeal to every player, but a good story gives the game a broader appeal and makes for a timeless game. Game over story or story over gameplay. This section is more for anyone who wants to make a game than for consumers, but it's possibly still a good idea to know this. Does your target audience value gameplay over story or story over gameplay? Maybe even somewhere in the middle. It's more of a sliding scale than an absolute yes or no. I and most people would say they're somewhere in between. It tends to vary game by game, but as a general rule of thumb, I tend to value both. I'd say I'm somewhere in between. It tends to vary game by game, but I tend to value both. One example I have that contradicts my usual way of thinking, however, is Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE. The weird Shin Megami Tensei Fire Emblem crossover that had idols in it for some reason. The battle system is the kind of challenging that you want from Shin Megami Tensei games, that also ties in Fire Emblem's weapon weakness system and adds its own unique spin. This spin is sessions, where your characters are often spinning, but for real. If you hit an enemy's weakness, you can chain further attacks, as long as your party members have the appropriate session skills. However, in the most polite and professional of terms, story is butts. The characters are extremely generic. The protagonist is basically Kirito Sword Art Online. Tsubasa is in love with him for no discernible reason. The closest I came to liking a non-Mirage character was the King of Belts himself, Yasuda Tsurugi, and his song Black Rain. By the way, what are Mirages? Is it ever explained? The fact that I feel like I have to ask this is kind of a bad sign in my opinion. The other example that was pointed out to me was visual novels. For those who want a good story more than good gameplay, because the story is almost all of it, there are a few visual novel series that are also mysteries because the style lends itself to reading like a mystery novel very well. There are games like the Ace Attorney series, When They Cry Higurashi and When They Cry Umineko, that are all mysteries. Ace Attorney is very involved when it comes to gameplay, comparatively. And then Higurashi and Umineko are more story-focused and less gameplay-focused, unless you play the fighting game spin-offs. Ace Attorney has you playing the Sherlock or a Herlock Sholmes, except you're a defense attorney investigating a crime. You're either running around and finding evidence, or you're in court, cross-examining witnesses. There are sections where gameplay is minimal, and you're just following along with conversations. In the end, if you're the one making the game, you call the shots. What do you care about more, story or game? Also, what does your target demographic care about more, as well? An okay soundtrack goes unnoticed. A good soundtrack is praised. A bad soundtrack puts you off immediately. This is one of the few things that isn't okay to fuck up. If the music is bad, then playing a game becomes unpleasant at best. If the sound effects are annoying and repetitive, playing with Teddy and the party in Persona 4. That's also unpleasant at best. Okay, I have a mild confession to make. My surname is Symphonica, but I don't know much of anything about music. The best I can manage is like A, D, and E on the guitar. Luckily, I know someone who has worked on music for actual games before. Astartes is a German audio engineer and composer who has worked on the soundtrack for games such as Studio Elan's Heart of the Woods, a Yuri visual novel about finding two girls who go to investigate rumors of the supernatural, and find much more than they thought they would. I asked him 3 things. What makes a soundtrack good? What makes a soundtrack great? And tell me about the sound effects and why they're important to the vibes of a game. And I think I hit his nerd button because he had a lot to say. So I'll summarize in my own words as best as I can and provide quotes as needed. Soundtracks and sound effects can affect how we feel about a character or situation. He even gave me an anecdote from a game he worked on. Let me tell you an anecdote about one of the games I was working on, which was a visual novel with a focus on mental health. We released an alpha demo and it was really criticized heavily in some parts. One of the most prevailing criticisms being that it's a super bad call to cast the psychiatrist/therapist as the villain. People went in depth to point out that this depiction in media, casting him as the manipulative, evil, scheming guy that's trying to twist the protagonist's mind, is reinforcing toxic stereotypes and discouraging people from getting help, which is obviously true. The problem? That was not his characterization at all. Dr. Faber was actually cast as a very helpful, genuine, kind person with a fine sense of humor and a deep empathy for his patients. So what happened? What happened was that one of the writers disregarded my instructions on the soundtrack and put a somber, oppressive track over the scene where you first meet him. That's all. The unanimous perception of our test audience was that he's a psychopathic villain. He also mentioned a series that turns Game of Thrones into a slapstick comedy by putting Seinfeld music and a laugh track on top of it. Nothing else changed. It's incredibly silly, but also a prime example of how music and sound can affect our perception. Another point he brought up is leitmotifs. Leitmotifs are musical phrases that get associated with people, phrases, or ideas. Games and stories have used leitmotifs to hide plot points, draw indirect comparisons, or associate a piece of music with characters. Take Tales of Symphonia, for example. There are multiple character-related songs for different scenes. Colette, for example, has a regular jolly-sounding theme, as well as a sad version of the theme. The same leitmotif is in both versions of the song, but one is fast and in a major key, and the It Is Sad version is slower and in a minor key. It's the same pattern associated with Colette, but played differently to establish a different mood. Astartes also provided an example in which he himself used leitmotifs in order to foreshadow a plot twist. A certain character's theme in Heart of the Woods is a different theme, but played backwards. I'm not going to play it here because I don't want to spoil y'all too much because you can play Heart of the Woods yourself. Also, I hate to talk about Undertale yet again, but it uses leitmotifs quite heavily to the point it has a whole wiki page on it. Every important character has their own leitmotifs. Even the mini-bosses have their own. Asgore has 2. One for Asgore all caps and one for so sorry in advance. Berg and Trukung. So yes, it's important that the music be good quality in general, but it should also be appropriate for the situation and vibe of the game as well. I began this video wondering why games get popular in the first place. There's no one surefire way to make something popular. If you want to make a game yourself, you'll never make something that everyone everywhere likes. if you make something for everyone, you're not making it for anyone. Oddly enough, however, the more you niche down, the more appeal you'll have. I'd never have gone for a game like, say, Baldur's Gate 3 if it wasn't so popular or talked about, but it wasn't something that I would have gone for on my own. I'm not really a strategy game girly. I'm a JRPG girly. That said, just make something for someone, somewhere, and hope for the best. The only things that I ask are that you put effort, care, and love for the craft into what you do. Because Lord knows we're not gonna get much of that from any big corporations. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting. Food for thought. Get to follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky. I talk more on Blue Sky, and I'm silly on Blue Sky sometimes. Don't forget to follow me on Twitch as well, and subscribe as well. Like and subscribe and comment. It helps me out. And give the video a little kiss on the forehead. And I'm going to give you a little kiss on the forehead. Thank you for the blood. Good night.